Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you for joining. So today we are going to talk about equity, inclusion, and access. We will define terms and talk about how equity, inclusion, and access impacts us in EMS education and what we can do to do our part to improve EMS overall.
Carlene, it doesn't seem like the video is running sound.
Oh, I can hear it on my end. Let me go back. Can you hear it now?
No, let me. Terry to the rescue. All right, she says you have to click the include computer sound when you share your screen. So maybe stop sharing and then
Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
I do understand. Let me go back. Let's see if that made a difference.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Good morning. How are you?
Cool.
So, can we talk about how you got here?
Hey, you think I got a funny looking face? I just thought it was funny.
Hey kids, I'm telling you get right here.
Man, we ain't doing nothing.
Go right here before I'm called cops.
So, you didn't do anything?
Nope.
Then what's all this?
Depends on who's reading it, I guess.
Well, looks broken. Skateboarding, huh?
Yes.
Is this the first time you've hurt yourself?
No, I get hurt all the time.
At home?
At home? He hurt himself skateboarding at the park.
Okay, ma'am. I'm gonna have a counselor come in and speak with you.
A counselor? For what? He's okay.
Well, I done told you them tricks were gonna put you in the hospital.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too. A nurse will be in a few minutes to help you check out.
What's up?
That doctor thought I did this to him.
How you doing?
Hi.
It ain't fair.
Fair has nothing to do with this. This is about you taking responsibility for your actions. Look, I know so many young men just like you that didn't do anything. And yet, most of them are in prison.
You don't know me. I ain't going to no prison.
If you don't want to end up in prison, you're going to have to get some new priorities And probably some new friends too. Look, you're not getting any younger. You need to get an education so you can get a good job.
Like you just like everybody else. You think you see, but you don't see. You see what you want to see.
I see what's in this folder. It shows me what you've been doing.
I ain't doing nothing.
I am not doing anything. Stop.
I ain't doing nothing.
I'm not doing anything. And yes, you were. Get to the timeout chair. Now, please. I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
So, did your perception of the young man change after you saw the video? How do we allow our biases to impact our patient care? So let's do a little self-reflection and think about, how did you feel when you saw what the young man was going through? And as the video played and you saw his history, did it change the way you thought about him, the way you saw him? And at the very end, when it showed how it all began, and the same person that's now he's sitting in front of, she was the same one that started that very thick folder that she held as an example of what he had been doing. So our biases definitely impact what we do. So when we talk about equity and inclusion and access, where does it all begin? And how do we promote equity, inclusion, and access in EMS education? Well, biases exist. And these are recent articles that have appeared in various forms of news outlets regarding disparities in healthcare and unequal treatment, racism, discrimination, and it flows from COVID to cancer to EMS care. And there are a lot of studies out there that exist that shows that there are disparities in healthcare. So what can we do and where does it start? We are the gatekeepers to our profession. So if they don't make it through, and by they, I mean the students and the future healthcare providers, they can't get into the field unless they come through us. So what are we doing to make a difference? What are we doing to impact a positive outcome for all of our patients, and not just some of our patients, but all of our patients? And basically, we have to start with the acknowledgement and the awareness. Biases exist, disparities exist, discrimination, stereotypes, inequities exist, oppression exists. So we have to be honest with ourselves and, excuse me, honest with our peers. And first we need to acknowledge, be aware and acknowledge that these things do exist. And once we acknowledge their existence, then we can make positive strides to make a difference and to make a positive change so that all of our patients will receive the same high quality care and have the same opportunity to recover and have good outcomes. Because ultimately, that's what we want. We want our patients to positively benefit from the care we provide. So it does start in the classroom. So we have to do our part. So let's talk about the difference between equality and equity. Equality is giving everyone the exact same thing. And as you see by the diagram on the top, everyone has the same size bike. The person in a wheelchair is unable to get on the bike. The guy next to her is way too tall for that bicycle. The lady, the third lady, is just right for her. And the little kid on the end is way too big. So that's equality. Everyone has the exact same thing. Equity is giving people what they need and meeting them at the point of their needs. So we have a specialized bike for the person that's in a wheelchair. We have a smaller bike for the kid so that everybody is able to ride and participate in the bike riding activity. So equity is understanding the needs of a person and meeting those needs. And equality is just everybody gets the same thing. Everybody gets 2 doses of morphine. Doesn't matter if you have a fractured femur, a broken hip, fractured pelvis, or a stubbed toe. Everybody gets 2 of morphine. And that's everyone receives the equal dosage, so everyone receives the same thing. But that's equality, everyone receiving the same thing. Equity is understanding that a fractured femur may be more painful than a stubbed toe, whereby a stubbed toe may not need any pain medication because for those of us that have experienced stumping our toe, the pain goes away in a short time. However, when you're dealing with a fractured femur, that's more painful there, so they're going to need more medication to alleviate the pain, so they may get more of morphine. So that's equity, is giving people what they need based on their needs, versus equality, everyone receiving the same 2 doses. And the same is true even with Narcan. With the new type drugs that are out there now, you have to give more morphine because 4 is not working. So you have to give more, not morphine, Narcan, in order for it to be effective and reverse the respiratory depression and so on and so forth. So that's the difference between equality and equity. What does it look like in EMS education? What are we promoting? Do we have students with disability, maybe a learning disability or dyslexia? Or are we allowing for accommodations? Are we going through the proper process? Now, our standards do not change. So it doesn't mean that you give people what they want and you let anyone come through your program. That's not what equity looks like. But if we can make accommodations to meet those needs, whether it's based on religion, are we allowing breaks so that those that need to pray during the middle of the class, they're able to pray? What are we doing to help our students? What are we promoting in our classroom? Are we insisting on equity in our classroom? And are we insisting that everyone is treated properly in our classroom? So EMS education, we model the behavior in our classroom, we hold our students accountable, we adjust our policies to allow for certain exceptions based on religious beliefs, based on learning disabilities. Do we even have someone come in to do maybe a test-taking seminar just to talk to students about how to take a test? So maybe it's not that they don't have the knowledge, maybe they are just unable to retrieve that knowledge, or maybe they have test-taking anxiety. What are we doing to help our students, to help foster a more conducive learning environment and allowing our students to be on that same footing so that they have an opportunity for success? So equity is meeting our students at their needs and not giving everyone the same test. Maybe we can make certain modifications. The MS Agenda 2050, one of the 6 guiding principles is socially equitable. And that means EMS as a whole, we're missing the mark. And the EMS Agenda 2050 wants everyone to have access to quality care, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, gender, and other social determinants. So are we withholding medications based on the premise that, oh, they'll be fine, they can tolerate pain better? How are we treating our patients that are having anxiety attacks? Are we treating everyone equally? Are we telling some to just calm down while we are comforting others, providing that comforting touch and reassurance and talking them through it and giving them medication to help them with their anxiety? Are we treating our patients equitably? Or are we allowing our biases to negatively impact our patient care? So for socially equitable to be one of the 6 guiding principles for EMS for the next 30 years says a lot. We missed the mark with the first 20. Are we going to make it in the next 30? And why haven't we achieved that goal yet? And again, it does start, ultimately it starts at home, but with our profession, it starts in our classroom, because again, we are the ones that are permitting them to go out and represent us. Some barriers to equitable care includes a lack of cultural humility and not understanding cultural norms for some cultures, language barriers, education, biases, those implicit biases, that stereotypes, the biases that arise without us even knowing it. And also fear of the unknown. So the barriers that exist can be overcome. They definitely can be rectified, but again, it's up to us. It's up to us to take those steps. It starts with the awareness and acknowledgement. And then what are we going to do? What steps are we going to take to make a difference in EMS to improve the quality of care and ensure that everyone receives our best each and every time? What are we going to do?
Let me tell you a story. A young couple, college sweethearts. They graduate school, begin their careers, get married, and start a family. As they start to approach their 30s, they begin to say that they're closing in on the American dream. They purchase their first home. 3 weeks after they close on this home, the husband becomes violently ill. So this family, husband, wife, 3 children, ages 5, 3, and 1, and a baby on the way, goes searching for the diagnosis that has stricken this otherwise healthy and vital 32-year-old man. Turn to your neighbor and say, 4 weeks later. As this man lays critically ill and dying in a hospital, doctors are circling around a cluster of diseases that they know must be the thing that is killing this man, despite the fact that all the tests for these diseases have come back negative. They begin to harass the husband and ask him to tell the truth and to really open up and let them know about his IV drug use and his secret unprotected sex with men. You see, they were trying to make the case to continue looking for HIV despite multiple negative tests. Finally, the wife comes and says, what are you looking for? To which the doctors reply, we're looking for HIV and sarcoidosis. So the wife, kind of perplexed because we thought we'd already ruled those things, they thought they'd already ruled those things out, says, well, why are you looking at only those diseases? To which the doctors say, well, as a young African-American male, she becomes irate and says, stop right there. I want you to check my husband for things that white people get. And magically, within days, they have a diagnosis. Stage 4B non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. and a prognosis. 2 weeks to live. The, you know, the implicit bias that existed within these doctors resulted in a behavior that showed what diseases they chose to and not to look for. The implicit bias of these doctors said how much value they placed or did not place upon the information that they received from the patient and his wife.
So, how does our bias impact our patient care? Are we reluctant to receive or trust the information we receive from some of our patients because of their socioeconomic status, whether they appear to be homeless? Or do we trust everything they say if they live in a nice house? Or we respond to an office building and they're dressed really nice? Are we treating the janitor different than we're treating someone that appears to be an executive officer? What are we doing? And what is implicit bias? So implicit bias are those unconscious bias, the stereotypes, the thoughts that we get when we see people based on the group they fall within, whether it's a nationality, race, gender, whatever group we think this person falls in, those thoughts that come to our mind immediately when we see them, before we know them, before we hear them open their mouth, before we have to say one word to them, just based on appearance alone, the feelings that we get, which are not natural, they're not born in us, they're taught. So just like culture is learned, stereotypes and biases are learned. They're learned from our family. They're learned from the media. They're taught to us based on the TV shows that we watch. So we get this information. It's learned from various sources, but it is learned. And if it's learned, it can be unlearned and it can be overcome. So we can overcome biases. We have to have the desire to overcome these biases. We have to have the desire to actually do better. And now that we are knowing more and we're learning better, we have to start doing better. And by start doing better, that's ensuring that we are doing the best and that we are creating an inclusive environment in our classrooms. And an inclusive environment, first, we do have to have diversity. We have to have that mix. We have to have that mix of people from various backgrounds, from various educational levels, from various academic and intellectual levels, because all of our students don't always start on the same footing. All of them didn't go to the same high school. They didn't go to the same elementary school. So we assign our groups to ensure diversity. We created a welcoming environment so that all of our students feel safe and they feel comfortable that they can engage and they can participate and they can not only ask questions, but answer questions. That we are creating that inclusive environment in our classroom. And inclusion is different than diversity. Diversity is just having that mix. And inclusion is making sure everything works together and that the people are blending, the approaches are blending. Or are we allowing our students to segregate themselves? Are we allowing that in our classroom? And what we have to do is model the behavior, and we set the tone. We set the tone. What does our educational staff look like? Do we have diversity in our staff? Does our staff mirror our students. So it's not just with our students and involving our students, but it's also with our staff. So we have to create that environment. And inclusion is that conducive environment. Inclusion is if you're making a cake. Diversity is having those ingredients. Inclusion is when you mix them in the proper order, blend them together, put them in the oven, and you have this delicious cake that comes out as a result of that inclusion. So we need to create an inclusive environment in our classroom. As it relates to religion, do we allow hijabs or turbans or crosses? What do we allow? What about the Sikh that doesn't cut his hair, or the Rastafarian with the dreadlocks, or the Jewish Pious or Pious, depending on if you're using the Hebrew pronunciation or the Yeti pronunciation. But what do we allow? Does a hijab pose a safety risk? If not, can we allow it? Should we allow it? Absolutely. Are we allowing it? What does our policy say? Now, being inclusive of someone's religious beliefs or customs does not mean we have to agree with them. It doesn't mean we have to believe it and support it or any of that. It just means that we should be respectful and allow it, as long as it's not going to be detrimental to our classroom or cause a safety risk. Now, what about someone that can't wear pants? Is that practical in EMS? Absolutely not. So even when we're talking about ADA and allowing those with disabilities, of making allowances for disabilities, our standards do not change. So it doesn't mean that you have to change your standard. But when was the last time your policy was updated? And is it in compliance with the law? Is it in compliance with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act? So are we in alignment with the law? Does it pose a safety risk? And if not, why aren't we allowing it? And now there are over 4,000 recognized religions. So are we going to be able to know each and every one? Absolutely not. But there are only, I'm going to say less than 10 of what's considered major religions in this country. And on most of our calendars, major religious holidays are listed. So are we scheduling mandatory class days or training days on known religious holidays? If we are, why? And why can't we change it? Because we set our calendars up in advance and the religious holidays are there for years to come. So what can we do to ensure that we're being respectful and inclusive in our classrooms? Not just based on religion, but what about nationality? What about gender? What about race? EMS is male dominated. So are the females in our classroom made to feel welcome? Are they included in the activity when we're having group activities? Are we including them or ensuring that they are included? Or are they being excluded? How are we recruiting? How are we recruiting our students? Are we going to an all-males gym to recruit women? Where are we advertising? And is everyone welcome in policy or practice? Because there's a huge difference. There are a lot of policies that are written that's not worth the paper they're written on. What's the culture of our organization? Are we truly inclusive? Are we truly accepting and welcoming? What are we doing in our classroom? What about our advertisement posters? What do they look like? Are the people on the posters, do they represent those that we seek to recruit into our classroom or for our educational positions? Does our staff mirror our students, and does our students mirror our community? Where are we recruiting? And what can we do to make a difference? How can we change our recruiting practices to ensure that we are reaching those that we seek to reach? Let's start by creating advertisements that reflect those that we want to recruit. Let's put them in places to where our target audience will actually see them. So if we want to recruit more women, are we going to areas that women frequent? Whether it's the gym, whether it's the school, whether it's the park, where are we going? Are we going to the community center? What type of recruitment activities are we engaging in? Our advertisements. Some programs advertise on the news, some advertise on social media. Who are your models? Who are your spokespeople? Who are you choosing to attract? And do the individuals that's recruiting them look like them? So think about that when we're putting our promotional material together. The way that we are going to overcome biases is to first have some respect for each other and mutual respect for others' beliefs. And again, you do not have to agree to respect. Are we creating that inclusive environment? Are we finding common ground? So when we look at each other, we see certain things. We see the surface of who we are. Are we able to check our biases at the door to take the time to actually get to know each other? Are we taking the time to have a conversation? Even to say, what's your background? How long have you been in EMS? Or what made you get interested in EMS? When we're at conferences or symposiums, do we talk to anyone other than the people we arrived with? Are we networking? When we attend conferences, are we connecting with people from across the country just to build our resource pool, to learn different ways of doing things and getting to know each other? So some activities that we can do in our classroom include small group sharing. If you have a new demographic in your community, do a research project on it. Let's research them. Let's find out what they believe. Is it a religious group? What do Jehovah's Witnesses believe? What do Muslims believe? Who can receive blood products? What cultures allow the females to speak with males that are not related to them, and which ones don't? Which cultures think eye contact is disrespectful, and which ones think lack of eye contact is disrespectful? The only way we're going to know that is if we do our research. And once we do our research, we need to do some self-reflection. And that self-reflection is actually going to help us to recognize, even if we say, yes, I provided them with the care based on our SOP, based on our standing orders, I provided them with the proper care. I went down the algorithm. Okay, so you followed the algorithm. But if it's a home where they take off their shoes upon entering and you choose not to take off your shoes, that's fine. But can you put on shoe coverings just to be respectful? Because most homes that do not wear their shoes inside, they have shoe coverings for their guests. So can you put on shoe coverings instead of just refusing altogether? Even though you provided the proper medical care, What did you do to that person mentally and emotionally? So are we really providing the best care that we can? When we start our class at the very, very, very beginning, after we go through the paperwork or in the midst of doing the paperwork and filling out all the forms and reading all the disclaimers and getting all of our signatures, can we have an activity where we pair our students together and have them share something about themselves with each other and report out? Are we doing, say, like a bingo game of sorts where you have to find out who does this represent? Who does this activity? Whose favorite food is this? Are we having them share something about their background? Just to get to know each other. And when we break down those barriers and those stereotypes, then we can prosper as a profession and as a society. But we have to break down those barriers. So do those small group activities to put our students together and let them share. And more often than not, we'll find that we have more in common with those that we thought we had nothing in common with. But we'll never know it if we never take the time to get to know each other. And that's something that we have to do. And that's something that we can actually promote inside of our classroom. Getting to know our students, having our students get to know each other. And once they get to know each other, they'll see, oh, Cindy is pretty cool. I didn't know Cindy liked to ride motorcycles. I didn't know Bob liked to ride horses. We won't know if we don't get to know. And small group activities are great. Researching the demographics of our communities and have each group share it with the class is a great way. And not just cultural norms and understanding the culture, but also understanding body language, understanding religious beliefs, understanding social interactions and social cues. And that's very important to understand each other. So those are just examples of activities that we can do. And there are a lot of other activities that we can engage in EMS education to help break down those barriers and allow our students to get to know each other. And once we start to break down those barriers and promote equity and inclusion in our classroom and insist on equity and care, then that'll translate from the classroom into the field. Because what they practice in our classroom, that's how they're going to play when they get into the field. Benefits of equity and inclusion: advocacy. When we respect someone, we're going to advocate for them. We're going to have empathy for them. We are going to ensure that they get the best because they matter to us and we see the value of them. We see the value of them as a person, and we want to make sure that they get proper care. It's definitely going to build the character of each individual. And once we start promoting that and we realize those benefits, it's going to make a difference, not only in our lives and our students' lives, but also in the lives of each and every person they touch. So yes, it starts small and we can make a difference in our classroom. And that starts with us. What are we tolerant of? What are we allowing? And what are we encouraging? And once we encourage these activities and promote these activities, and we are having our students engage in critical thinking activities, and they realize that someone that had a different background than them may be able to help solve this problem when they were stumped because they've never seen a patient in this position before or with these exact same signs and symptoms, and they have to think critically to problem solve, and someone else may have a better idea? Or how do we get to this patient? How do we treat this patient when they are confined or entrapped? How do we provide proper care with this situation? And someone else may have a mechanical background. Maybe they were a mechanic. Or maybe someone was a caregiver and they understands how to properly provide lubricant to, because you have a constricting band on, or how to relieve pressure. Whatever the case may be, it's not just diversity in appearance, it's diversity in thought. And diversity in thought is gonna hugely impact us as healthcare providers. And it's definitely going to impact our patient outcome, because what we do, a large part of what we do, we have to think critically. We have to investigate. We have to problem solve. And the best way to solve problems is getting diverging points of views and understanding that there are different ways of doing things. And when we put the pieces together, then we can have a nice pie, a nice puzzle, and the problem can be solved. And in order for us to care for that whole person, we must understand culture. We must understand who that person is. Because without understanding who that person truly is and understand what's going on with them and what's meant by particular body language or actions or responses and activities, once we understand that, who they are, then we can properly care for them. Just like we need their medical history. We need to know their allergies before we give them a medication. We need to know who they are so that we can properly treat them. Because if we're creating fear or adding anxiety to the situation, we're not doing our patient as much good as we can. In fact, we're doing them a huge disservice. If we're creating anxiety, if we're scaring them, if we are disrespecting them, we're harming them and not helping them. And we're there to help. So then that's what we need to do. And we need to ensure that our students are respectful and understand that. So when they get out into our communities, that practice carry on. Now, allyship is a word that is often used, and a lot of people say, well, I want to be an ally. What can I do? And when I hear allyship, I think of cheerleaders. Yeah, you can do it. Go. Yes, you should be treated fairly. Yes, you should be treated right. I agree with you. I believe you. Go ahead. Make it happen. I say take it a step further from allyship. Don't just be a cheerleader. Be an investor. Invest something of yourself. And when I say invest, I'm not talking about money. I am talking about invest your time. Invest your resources. Invest your knowledge in this person. Invest in the students that's being mistreated. Invest in them. Give them something of yourself. Give them your time. Advocate for them. Advocate for them at your clinical sites. Advocate for them in the classroom or with your institution. If your policy hasn't been updated to where someone can wear a turban, we're allowed to wear baseball caps. So why can't we wear a turban? Why can't we wear a hijab? Why can't we wear a crucifix? invest, advocate for your patients, for your clients, for your students, if you need to. Advocate for them. Be willing to put something on the line. I say, instead of being an ally, be an accomplice. Being an accomplice for change, not to engage in criminal activity, but to be a force for change. Speak up. Let your voice be heard. Be an accomplice. Be willing to get your hands dirty and risk something. Because when you speak up and you call someone out on harassing or discriminatory practices or bias, then yes, you can expect some retaliation, but be willing to speak up. Be willing to advocate for. Be willing to invest in this person. Don't be afraid to let your other instructors see you talking to this student that looks different. Don't be afraid, risk something. If you believe in them and you want to be an ally, be an accomplice. Help them to advance their position. Help them gain the knowledge, skills, and ability that they need to have a long-lasting, successful career in EMS. Help them risk something. So, are we willing to invest in our students? Are we willing to advocate for our students? Are we willing to be accomplices with our students to help them fight discrimination if needed? Regardless of the reason, are we willing? Are we willing? In MS education, we also have to be mindful of systemic barriers and access challenges. And by access challenges, do we only have our books online? And have we considered that not everyone has access to the internet? And regardless of the cost, some areas, especially rural communities, don't offer high-speed internet. So are we allowing our students time to work after school, to submit their work? Are we locking our classrooms as soon as class gets over? Are we considering that someone may have a volatile home life and they're not allowed to study at home? Are we scheduling breaks so that our students are able to get something to eat from the school cafeteria? Are we providing them resources if they have learning disabilities or food insecurities? Are we mindful as to the times that we're starting class based on transportation of the vast majority of our students? Is our entrance process biased? Could we include some of our fees in our tuition so that it can be covered by financial aid? Because poverty does not mean that you don't have the aptitude to be an excellent, outstanding AMT, advanced EMT, or paramedic. So what are we doing to reduce, minimize, or eliminate the access challenges to our program? Just like most of who we are below the surface, a lot of systemic barriers or access challenges are also below the surface, but it's up to us to consider them so that we can do the best to help our students and recruit the best students possible for our program. And poverty is a huge challenge. So if we can provide resources, because if someone is hungry, they're not going to perform as well. Or if they can't afford additional health insurance, are we eliminating them from the class whereby we could include it in financial aid? So what are we doing to eliminate those access barriers? And so that's just something that we need to think about and just do a little reflection on our own program. On your screen right now is a QR code So if you'll take your camera and scan the QR code, this is the implicit association test. And what the implicit association test is, you can take the test based on religion, race, ethnicity, color, gender, weapons, a number of things. So if you scan that QR code, you will see the test pop up, and once you agree, you can take it. And Harvard, Virginia, several institutions participated in this research to get this information. And this is just for you to do a little self-reflection to see where you fall. And this is one of the most respected implicit association tests out there. And take the test, see where you fall. And this is just personal, just for you. I won't see the results. NAEMSE won't see the results. It's just personal to you. You will see your results, and you may agree, you may disagree, or it may open your eyes to implicit biases that you didn't even realize you had. And like I said, they are learned and not inherited to us when we're born. It's not a natural process. It's not inherent. It is a learned learned. It's a learned behavior, just like our culture is learned. And just like we learn those stereotypes and biases, we can overcome them. And the way we overcome them is by having that desire and that the willingness to do better. And once we know better, we can do better, we should do better. And we may just need to stretch our boundaries a little bit, not get outside of who we are, but stretch our boundaries a little bit to learn a little bit more, to understand different cultures, understand different processes, and also make sure that we model the behavior in our classroom. And that's essential for our profession as a whole, is that we model the behavior in our classroom. And with that, are there any questions?
I don't see any questions yet, but the Q&A is open. So please feel free to submit your questions, everyone. Any questions?
And as we wait for questions, in case someone is typing, just remember that being a decent person, being respectful goes a long way. And we should make sure that we insist upon that in our classroom so that it will translate to patient care. Because what our students learn in our classroom as acceptable, that's what they will carry out when they begin to engage in field practice. So just keep that in mind, that that's what we definitely need to do, is model that behavior and insist on proper care.
All right, it looks like we have one question here from Amira.
Okay.
Can educators get training on how to build a more inclusive environment? Are there any evidence-based resources or recommended resources in general?
Yes, and there are a lot of resources out there. And as educators, you can get, we can definitely get additional training on creating a more equitable and inclusive environment. That's 100% certain. And there are a lot of resources out there, various price points. Some are free. Some you do have to pay for, but it's going to depend on your preference and what exactly you're looking for, and whether or not you want a canned activity or personalized activity that is catered to or designed around your program, your environment, and your institution, your organization. So yes, there are programs out there. I do not recommend any particular program for inclusion and equity. I will be happy if you would like to speak with you about this, and definitely provide you with resources. My email address is up there. If you would like to email me, I'll be happy to talk with you one-on-one to share specific resources or provide you with options as far as training. But I do not as a whole, because there are a lot of resources out there and I don't know all of them, but I do know that there are some great ones. And I know that you can have inclusion courses or programs tailored to your organization, which I find that to be the best approach. So definitely get my email address and send me an email, and I'll be happy to discuss that with you, share resources with you, and talk about options and possibilities.
All right, it doesn't seem like we have any more questions here.
Okay, well, very good. Well, thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this was beneficial for you and that you are working to definitely promote a more equitable and inclusive environment in your classroom. And if I could be of any assistance to you in any way, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the screen. And if you cannot reach me, if you haven't been able to get my email down, you can definitely reach out to NAEMSE and they can put you in contact with me. So thank you again for joining and have a wonderful day. Ms. Rio, do you have anything to add?
Yes, so I put the link to obtain your CEU in the chat, and that will also be included in tomorrow's follow-up email, and I will make sure that we have Carlene's email included in that follow-up email as well, along with a link to the recording. So I think with that, everything is wrapped up. Carlene, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you speaking on such an important topic. You're just fantastic, and we appreciate you so much.
Thank you. It's definitely my pleasure.
And thank you everybody for attending, and we will see you next time. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.